Welcome back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories, along with practical tools and actionable insights that can help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have a special guest with us. Her name is Devin DeGriff. She's a physical therapist, transformational coach, intuitive healer, and author of Good Grief: The Journey from Grief to Joy, a powerful memoir and guide to transforming pain into purpose. After experiencing the devastating loss of her mother to murder, Devin embarked on a deeply personal healing journey, one that led her from sorrow to strength. Through her book, she blends raw storytelling with the expert therapeutic techniques, offering readers a roadmap to resilience and joy. Passionate about helping others reclaim their light after loss, Devin Works focuses on embodiment. She guides individuals through all forms of loss and grief with compassion and empowerment. She believes that healing is not about forgetting, but about finding a renewed sense of connection through knowing the core truth of who you are. Beyond her writing and healing work, Devin finds joy in dancing, immersing herself in nature, and discovering new places through travel. She enjoys time spent with the ocean and her pup. Learn more about Devin and explore ways to work with her at drdevindegriff.com. Devin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having
And I didn't want to mispronounce your dog's name, but how do you say that?
It's Anawainaway, which is Hawaiian for rainbow.
Oh, I love that. And how old
Yeah.
is your pup?
She's about 6.
Oh, that's awesome. She's still got the young puppy in her.
Yeah, no, totally.
Well, I just want to say it's a real honor to bring you on the show. I know, based on the bio that we read, you went through a very tragic moment of life that most of us don't get to experience. And I know that's a very deeply affected wound that happened there. I'd love for you to share with our listeners just a little bit more about yourself and tell us a little bit about that grief journey that you were on.
Yeah, totally. So one thing is to say, my last name is, and I'm not picking on you or anything, but I was born, my birth name is Devin DeGriff. And DeGriff, right? Even though it's spelled, semantics, E-I-I-E after C, all that jazz, but my name is pronounced DeGriff. Um, and I didn't realize my life would be so defined and so embarking upon the journey of grief when I obviously, when I was a kid, had no clue, had no clue. Um, so I had a pretty good child and grew up and everything, and was born in Northern Florida and then grew up in Vegas. And I had left for college and was in college when basically I was reaching out to my mom to invite her over to Kansas for Thanksgiving. And I went to go text her and got a text back from my mom that was obviously not my mom. And it was right away, it was like red flag of like, this isn't my mom's energy. These aren't her words. And when I went to go check in with my sister, my mom's missing. And the communication my sister was also getting was not obviously not our mom. Like we all kind of like know inherently the communication with our family members and just like the energy and the words that people use, right? And you just can kind of know, even if you don't consider yourself intuitive. It's just a heartfelt thing. And we both knew that's not mom. And so we put out a missing persons report, and there's a long story about that. But basically, my mom goes missing, and Las Vegas CSI happened to have Dateline NBC following Las Vegas CSI, and it just so happens that they find out about my mom's story, and lo and behold, my mom has been killed. Not she's not just missing; she's been murdered in my childhood home. And of course, I go into absolute shock when I learn of this. My younger sister, nonetheless, is calling me to telling me like, "Mom's dead. Mom, someone he killed her," and basically my whole awareness and like sense of reality was like rug pulled out from underneath of you. Like, what the fuck? Like this shit happens. This is real, right? Like you see it, you see these things on TV and they're so sensationalized, and there's such a, especially in today's culture, such a normalization of murder and death and crime dramas, this, that, and the other. And it literally was like this, like the fuck is reality? What is reality? And like full trauma shock, right? And genuinely don't even know how I like managed existing from that point. There was a good 2 or 3 years where I was very much living disassociated, which means that you're living outside of your body. You're existing, but you're not like here, alive and engaged in life, right? And I was also experiencing a lot of physical pain from my own ailments. And so basically, Chris, I was resisting living. I didn't want to live. I didn't want to be in my body. And I was waiting. It was like I would wake up every single day after losing my mom, and it was like it'll all be a dream. I'll wake up and she'll be here, and I would have dreams that she would. And so it was this real challenge with accepting reality and accepting what was, right? And really being not only at peace, but just like with reality, right? I was so removed from reality because I couldn't understand reality at that point, right? And so I pretty much just did what I knew how to do at that point, which I think a lot of people do when they're in shock, is I just put my head down and just stayed work, like went to work and was just like, okay, I have to move on with my life, right? Like, I guess that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Nobody gives you the handbook of like how to deal with this stuff. And also, most people don't experience the level of like most people maybe lose their parents from they're leaving, like they become ill and they're heading out, and you kind of can prepare yourself. And this one was very different because I never expected that to happen, and for it to happen so fast in such a surreal way was like, what is life about? And so I started asking these questions to spirit, to the divine, God. I use all those words interchangeably. I personally connect to the word divine. And I was just asking, like, what the fuck? Like, what is going on? What is all this about? Like, why is this happening? And if you're an all loving God, then why would you take my mom out? And so basically, I started like questioning existence, questioning, like, why am I here? What is this whole thing about? Like, like why does pain and this amount of darkness have to be a part of this whole thing? Like, what the fuck are we doing here? And basically saying I don't want it. Like, if this is what this is, I don't want this, right? So basically I was ready to kill myself when I was probably like 25. Like 2 3 years later, I had gone to grad school, which again was how I was dysfunctionally dealing with my grief. Was just basically put my head down and just do something that seemed like it was going to move my life forward, right? But then it was too much. Like that first semester PT school, my nervous system was fried, and it was just like, I'm done. Like I cannot live anymore. And I was just ready to go. I was just ready to leave the planet, die, kill myself. And when I was about to do that, I heard the loudest no I've ever heard in my life. Like it was like somebody screaming into my ear saying, "No, that's not how your story ends. That is not like your story has to be shared with other people." And I'm like, "Oh fuck." like, like like what? Like why me? Like why me, right? And so basically I ended up going into this, like in this moment I'm sitting in my bathroom depressed and like talking to myself basically to the wall, but it's the divine saying to me like, no, it's not your time and your story has to be shared. And I'm like, okay, so if this is if this is what I have to do, then I need help. Like right, like I need you, I need some support, and like we got to go all in. We can't half-ass this. Like it's like if we're gonna do this, let's go. And I didn't actually know what I was really committing to at the time. I was more so just saying that like I just didn't want to live as a zombie, basically, right? Like living in that like kind of half existence is not fulfilling at all. Anywho, so basically, since that journey, it's been following the breadcrumbs that the divine leads me to of where are my next steps to lean into my life purpose and having this story be shared with people. And so over the last 15 years, I knew a book was coming out of this and that I would share my story eventually. I didn't know how or what the book would be like. And honestly, in the first 10 years, I was like, I don't have it in me. I know it's like I could hear a voice inside of my consciousness from the divine saying like, you have to write this book, you have to share this. And I was just battling with it for many many years, as I was healing. And then in the last 2 years is when I was like, okay, it's time to really sit down and write this book. And I learned a way to write from my intuition, from my heart, from my genius, and to channel what the story needed to be shared to the people who need to read this story. And so it doesn't have any extraneous details of all the sensationalization of the murder and everything. It just has just what's needed to show people basically my story is very stark and dark and scary, and most people are not going to experience that. But what I'm here to tell people and empower people in is if you can hear my story, read my story, and see that I came out of that darkness and empowered to sit here before you and share with you what we are capable as a human to recover from, like that's really what this story is about. And I remember when writing the book and the subtitle came through of the journey from grief to joy, is that's really what the book is about. The book is actually about the joy that I get to experience now by virtue of the grief, is that the grief is what taught me to appreciate what life has and to see the joy of the moments and to appreciate connections in life and everything in that. So long story short, that's kind of the gist of, there's so much more I could share about the intricacies of everything, and I'm sure more will come through as we talk more. But yeah, my journey is a journey and a story of grief. But I always say my name is Devin DeGriff because it's the divine of grief. Like I'm literally here to show people the divinity of grief. And believe it or not, there is some divinity of grief. There is something that we gain from it. And so I love that we're sharing this conversation, and it's part of your life purpose too, is to bring this more forward and normalize it for everybody.
Well, Devin, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story on here in this last few minutes because you do have a very powerful story. And as you said, most of us aren't going to experience something that's tragic in our life. I had my first podcast who did face his father murdered his mother. I didn't find out about that till we recorded the podcast episode, and that was a big shock because I've never experienced that in my life. I don't know what that's like, but
Yeah.
I can tell it's a very painful thing to go through and very dark. You said a lot of things I wanted to touch on, ask you some questions about as you were going through. And one of them
Yeah.
that you brought up is that we do have all these crime shows on TV. You know, we have True Blood, we have NCIS, we have CIS, Las Vegas, and all over the cities. I think you brought up a very big point because as you were sharing that, I was thinking about, I was a big NCIS fan and I loved the guy Ducky, the mortician, and it was always, bring a body in, Ducky's pulling organs out, doing his thing. And like you said, it becomes very normalized that we're just seeing murder and we're seeing crime and we're seeing these things. And at the end of the day, when we hear the word murder, we go, oh, okay, well, somebody got killed. We almost pass it off because
Hmm.
it's been so normalized. But for people that have actually experienced that in that capacity, I can't imagine how radically different that experience is from what it's portrayed to be on TV shows.
Oh my gosh, it's radically different because what comes to me is we've normalized it so much we're actually numb to it. Like people don't actually realize that there's real families that are impacted by a murder. And it was just like this, because like when Dateline NBC asked my sister, who's only 20 years old at this point in time, right, asking her if they can share the story, my sister thought that she was doing a service to my mom's story by sharing the story. And my immediate reaction was absolutely not. This is not entertainment. Like this is our lives. And I think that can really be lost on people the more that we're becoming numb to death and to death as a whole, but murder and crime and the heinous acts in which people look at humans. It's like we've lost the humanity. And the truth is that anytime anybody's lost, died, there's somebody that's grieving, there's somebody that's lost something, there's somebody that's impacted by that. And we lose sight of that because we're losing the bigger picture of what is to be a living human, and then what is lost when a human is gone, right? And I really think that all this sensationalization has numbed us to that. And so it was very isolating for me because it was like it's hard enough to get people to connect on grief, right? And just being like, anybody like, right, like as many of your listeners are going to know, it's like you have to find these sub communities where we're willing to talk about it, and usually it's somebody who's experienced it. So that's not normalized in society to even bring up these conversations. And so it's really fascinating that it's like death is normalized but in a very dysfunctional way so that we all become numb to it. And it really can isolate those of us who have experienced grief as a whole, but certainly the very shocking traumatic ones. And that's where I'm really passionate about. And what is like, I work with people with trauma and complex conditions because there's a real entangling into our consciousness that um, there's not a lot of space out in the world for, because it's because of the way that we are societally kind of viewing these things and setting the precedent for. So it's like time for that to change.
It
Yeah.
really is because, I just can't imagine going through an experience like yours where this happened in your childhood home. This is what I think people don't understand about a murder in that sense. And I've watched a lot of crime shows. So I've watched the more raw ones that aren't sensationalized too much. But, this was somebody's home they grew up in. This is a place they have memories in. And let alone, by the way, this is a parent they're close to, somebody that's been there for them from day one.
Yep.
all of a sudden taken out by somebody that is not really close to the family and somebody that just took everything away in a split second. And all of a sudden, what people don't understand about grief is that split second, like you described, is utter trauma and shock. You're not even really processing at that point. You're really just in disbelief and how could this happen? Why could this happen? Why did this need to happen? Like your brain is so trapped in that one state, one moment that you can't even get anywhere else around it when that happens. And it takes a long time to let alone process that or even try to find understanding or purpose and meaning through that. It is just so hard to get to that place
Yeah.
under a situation like that.
But it's possible. Like that's the thing is that it is, and like, because I mean, I had choices, right? Like I could have totally. There's so many people out there right now that had trauma and like they didn't know how to, right? I actually didn't know how to. I leaned into, but like I did have a choice to just like fold to it all, right? And that's actually like the easier decision because of this. Is that what comes to me about what you're saying is basically our whole sense of reality shifts. Like we actually are like we separate from reality for a moment because it's we're in a state of like liminal space or like a separation of like what's real and what's not, and it's a very delicate place of existence that unless you've experienced it truthfully you can't really understand it. You can kind of conceptualize it, but it's definitely a unique experience that those of us who've experienced real true traumatic shock is you're kind of in an in-between space. And so trying to navigate coming back to reality and integrating that experience into your reality, that's where the healing happens, is integrating the experience. What most people do is, again, because this isn't normalized and we don't have these integrative tools about like the psycho-emotional as well as the medical aspect of it. What I'm trying to say here is basically the experiences are part of our life. And what we do is we figure out a way in our consciousness to separate from them to just function. But healing happens is in reintegrating those experiences and having a different relationship to the experience. So my memories of walking through my childhood home and seeing blood splatter sprays in my childhood bedroom where they were looking for blood will not go away. My shock and awe of seeing all the things that I was seeing will not go away, but the way that I relate to those memories in my consciousness is different now, so I'm not as charged. And so the way that I work with people is we work with the way that your body held those memories. It's because it's not only our
Mm.
consciousness and our awareness that is experiencing, we're actually experiencing that in the body, and that's actually where healing happens. Is I guide people into and facilitate us uncovering and getting to know the parts that are wounded that we're actually like experiencing day in and day out in our nervous system, and that is what allows us to integrate. So healing actually happens in the integration of our experiences. So that's where I do think a lot of people are not served in today's world because medical providers aren't looking at it from this perspective, and then like holistic healers aren't looking at it from this perspective. And the only reason I can is because I lived it. I took my life experience and was like, okay, how the hell do I heal from this? And then I was guided on my path, and as I was guided on my path, I would take my wisdom from that experiences and then sharing it with my clients and applying it to other people. And so I do want people to know there is a way out of it, and there is a way to reintegrate and come to greater peace with the life experiences you have, no matter how heinous.
Well, I think that's, a big part of trauma too, that I walked my own journey of trauma in my life. And I'll just say, like, the hardest thing I found going through trauma is that your brain gets stuck in fight or flight. It's stuck there for a long time. And a lot of that attributes to how we identify and attach with our emotions, how we feel. It also can be wrapped up in a story that we tell ourselves or a story we believe. And I'm never ever going to deny anybody those things at all. But what I'm going to say is those things do feed us in that loop. And so what I found really helpful when I coach people, by the way, is diving in that story, like you said, not to ignore those things or try to go on with life like it never happened. Those things will cause more damage, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But going back into that story and trying to piece together, what really happened, what are things I'm feeling? Because I'm very big about telling people that you're not your emotions. Those are messages, by the way, that your body's trying to communicate to you, that you're not those things. Those are just messages trying to communicate. And when we listen to them as messages, they can guide us on the healing journey really, really well if we listen to them.
No,
And
totally.
that's where I think it's hard when we go through trauma is creating a narrative and a story for ourselves that can move us forward because I do believe, by the way, like you said, those images we have of our trauma are never going to go away. I mean, they're still going to be there 20, 30, 40 years down the road. They're still going to be there. So they're never going to go away. But what I'll say is if we always live there, though, that pain can be very consuming, like you described on your own journey. And I've been there too, by the way. I've been trapped in it my own self. And I think it's very hard coming out of it to try to figure out how do we piece together a story that supports us moving forward, and how do we learn to carry this grief with us. I think it's a very big challenge a lot of people have.
Well, I mean, that's the journey, right? Is because your grief doesn't go away, and it's like, how is it along for the journey but not defining your journey? Is right? Is
Mm.
like I could have had grief define my journey. I could have had my entire identity around grief when the truth of my existence is actually joy, and what I'm here to share with people is joy. And but it's by virtue of going through that I was able to be in joy, right? So what happens is that when we have emotions, any emotion that we can't process in the moment, is we compartmentalize it, or we embody it, we somaticize it. So in somatic therapy is and this being somatic emotional release, somatic embodiment work that I do. Basically, premise of this all is, so you have something big shocking happen, you can't deal with it in the moment. Somehow what we do is we figure out, I'm going to stuff it in the body and just kind of like store it in here, right? And so in some, like in Chinese medicine, like the liver is anger, right? And so this is how there's a lot of traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, they relate our organs to emotions. It's because we do actually hold and store emotions in our bodies. And so what we do, and what sounds like you do as well, is that we go and we explore those emotions that we couldn't deal with there, but we, with the help and support of a guide that knows what they're doing, as we go back and we touch base with the parts of us that experience those emotions that didn't get to process them at that time. And we facilitate them being able to process what they can healthfully process in that moment. Because as you even said, is like, if we push into this sort of stuff, you can actually re-traumatize people, because basically these parts know what they need. And 9 times out of 10, honestly, the part needs us to come and be with it, to just hear it out,
Mhm.
to hold it, to just like witness it, because we didn't have the capacity to witness it back then. So it's really profoundly healing to touch base with these parts in a guided fashion, because when you're on your own, you're just going to be in the circle. You're going to be in the loop of being triggered by it, right? Because you have a story. But when you're with a guide, is that we can rewrite the way that you are holding that story in your body by virtue of getting to know it, not to solve it, but to just listen to it. Literally 9 times out of 10, it's like it just needs to be heard, it needs to be seen, it needs to be witnessed by you. And but having a guide is critical, especially depending on how much more complex your life experience is.
Yeah, and that's, that I'm glad you said what you did about giving these emotions a space to feel seen and heard and understood, because that's something that grievers in particular, I've always said, we're in a very emotionally vulnerable place, and we are seeking, by the way, somebody to give us those things because we are terrified of our existence at a certain point. And the sad part is we oftentimes run into people that I say that are unsafe, people that don't hold space for us, don't make us feel seen, say like, well, it's been a month or two. Are you over this yet? Are you able to move on? And that just trauma doesn't work that way. Grief does not work that way. Those are very outdated, hurtful ideologies, and people do get re-traumatized all the time. I know something that I work on a lot with clients is teaching them how to become the observer and saying that we're just going to be over ourselves, like somebody, like we're watching ourselves from 20 feet up in the sky, looking down and saying, what situation did you face? What did this look like for you? What did it sound like? What did it feel like?
Hmm.
Not saying I am those things, but I feel it looks like, it sounds like, giving ourselves that little tiny break between that emotion to really, like you said, hold space for it, because oftentimes those emotions don't want to hurt you, but they're trying to tell you what you need. And the minute you can feel the need by, I always equate it to when you're tense, your shoulders are up. But when you listen to that emotion, all of a sudden it just releases.
Hmm.
And that's not to say, by the way, it gets fixed and goes away, but it's to say that once it's acknowledged, you can go, oh, I got this. I can handle this right now. And just
Well,
giving
you're
you that
integrating it.
relief.
Yeah, it's in the acknowledgement of it that you're actually integrating it into your lived experience. It's in the denial of it, is that when it actually gets to perpetuate, right? And I love what you're talking about. So the way I would say it is you have to, so like when we're in our shit, when we're in the shit and we're in the wound, if we just try to approach the wound, we're still identified by the wound, right? We're in the story, we're identified by, we're just in the shit of it. What we have to do, and these are the words I would give to what you're talking about, is we all have two modes of awareness in our consciousness. We have our default mode of awareness, which is our egoic kind of fear-based fight or flight, just stay safe mode of awareness, and then we have our higher mode of awareness, which can relate to like higher self, divinity, um higher wisdom, right? And so what is critical is being able to get a different vantage point, right? Is that all healing starts from finding a different vantage point. And so the work I do sounds very similar to yours, but like it's critical for people to connect to a higher version of themselves so that we can go back into these memories from a different lens. And it's in that different lens that we can be the witness and observe things from a different point of view and get some truthfulness of what was happening and get another perspective versus if we're only going back into those memories from a in it perspective, you're just in your shit and you're just mucking around re-traumatizing yourself, right? And so I think that that is something that I wish more providers out in the world, because there's a lot of providers that like mean well, but they're still just keeping people in their shit. And it's really from this higher perspective that you can see things from a different angle and from a different lens, and have a little bit more of a different perspective to be feeding your consciousness with, which honestly is usually a very truth, like up here is very truthful. Down here is usually the illusion of what we think is happening or
Mm.
what it all meant, um, because we're in the charge of it all.
That's really well said because I think that's why I've always encouraged people to say, be careful with therapy and coaching. Those both have modalities that work in certain areas, but sometimes therapy, if you don't find the right therapist for you, you can end up just reliving your trauma. And that's a really dangerous road to go down, by the way, especially people who do go through very traumatic circumstances like you went through, with being part of a murder.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to go walk back in those memories and relive it again because it will keep you trapped in that muck, like you said. And so I think,
Yeah.
finding those people that can help you not sit in the muck, but reflect upon it and always keep you, finding that new perspective is really the best way to help people through those traumas. And it does happen, over an extended period of time for a lot of people. There's no quick fix to it, is what I share with people. It's never going to happen that way.
Yeah,
Um,
I wanted to speak to that earlier when you said that, and I talk about it in my book at length, is because it's all individualized. Like your journey to recovering and empowering yourself from your grief journey is individualized. It is not going to be the same for everybody. And there's a relative trend to it. Like that's I said in my book of like, I don't need to tell you the stages of grief and like blah, 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 but it's very individualized and it's non-linear. It's non-linear of how things will come up and things will happen. And I actually find that more empowering personally because it allows us to be in that individual experience of like, okay, what you are experiencing is okay. That's your experience. You're not supposed to have any other experience. But I think a lot of us too in our society of normalization, it's like, well, am I on track? Am I doing this right? It's like there's no beautiful way to move through grief, okay? It's ugly. Okay.
Yeah, I love that you said that because, looking at the example of what you went through, if you were to tell somebody, they're going to go, okay, well, I've watched CIS. I know that this, and this happens. And, if we look at the blood spatter here, we look at this, they're going to go down that road. And that's the normalization road of things. That's where we've numbed it down, like you said. Instead of them saying, oh, wow, you lost your parent to that. Wow, that's incredibly painful. Like, what can I do to support you? Or what do
Mm,
you need right now? A lot of people's first reactions are that normal numbness road when we really should be over here, not in the normalcy of things, but in this road of saying, how can we support and how can we help guide? And what do you need right now? And
yeah.
really shifting that focus. I wanted to ask you, I know on your healing journey that you went on, because that was such a traumatic event, what were some major pivotal moments for you after that happened that put you on this path of healing? Because I know you shared with me a little bit about finding a spiritual walk after this happened and really diving into the divine. And I love that, by the way, because I'm one of those people. But I wanted to ask you, what were some pivotal moments on your healing journey that led you to where you are today?
Yeah. Um, I love that because it is these, like the word pivot, right? There's these moments of that you can shift and pivot things. So they are these pivotal moments where things start to shift and you start to move in a direction of greater embodiment, right? So I would say that a pivotal moment, probably in the first 2 to 3 years, was I was working, I was going, I was my undergrad is in exercise science, and I was working as a physical therapy assistant, trying to get hours to apply to PT school. So I was in this physical therapy clinic, and I was just kind of going through the motions of life at this point, pretty much numb, but just like knowing I needed to do something. And there was this woman who was a psychologist who looked right at me and was like, "You're not okay. Like, I can see it."
Mm.
Like, she just saw right through the whole character I was playing, right? And she was just like, "You're not okay. You need help." And I was like, and I just like, she saw right through me. She saw me, right? Like, I was seen. So then I started crying, and I'm like, "Yeah, I really do." I wasn't smiling at that time. I was like, "Yes, I do." Um, but it was just following these, again, these breadcrumbs. And so she led me, and I said, "I don't have any money at this point." And so she said, "There's a community program that you can apply for income-based therapy." So at that point, I just started with therapy, and it was only a little bit that really that worked for me, but it was just this pivotal shift of somebody seeing me and then me following what that breadcrumb was of me getting support, right? So then there was these other, then there's multiple moments of me basically leaning into other humans being here for me and supporting me. So I would say that was a big pivotal point. When I went to PT school and heard from the divine no, and that whole story, that's the biggest pivotal point of just like, okay, we're not going that down that route. And then there was a point where I was going to move. I was in North Carolina, and I knew I wanted to move somewhere. And I just literally threw my hands up to divine and said, "Show me where to go. Just like guide me." And I just, it's literally like a thread in your heart that you're guided towards things when you let go and just say, "Guide me." Um, I need to back up just a little bit because there was another point in PT school where I found mindfulness. So the very first thing I started with was just a mindfulness basic course on the weekend where it was just like feeling your feet on the earth, tasting a grape, like really feeling the sensual experience. And so honestly, a big pivotal point in my journey was starting to feel again, because like for the longest time I was numb, and so starting to get into feeling and observing what was happening. So before I left North Carolina, I was started mindfulness and meditation, and then was led out to Oregon. And when I got to Oregon, it literally, like there was these moments of like a knowing of like, okay, here's home. Okay, here's the next step. And it was literally just like I didn't have anything else, right? So I was like, fuck it, okay, guide me. Like I got nothing else, I got nothing else. Guide me. And then following those little breadcrumbs. And again, I never knew which one would come, where it was coming, but just was like, okay, just the next one. And so, yeah, so once I came into Eugene, Oregon, I started up my clinic. And then all of the continuing education courses in my degree for physical therapy, I was led to. So I was led to visceral manipulation that taught me, I was healing myself of what are my organs holding and how do we release that through manual therapy. Then I was guided towards craniosacral therapy and how do we work with the somato-emotional and dialoguing with these parts. And so I went through that and then learned all that and applied that in my clinic. So basically, I took like 15 years worth of curriculum in like 3 years, but it was all guided by the divine of being like, here's the next course. And I was just applying those courses real time to people in the moment. And it was amazing that the skills that I've now had, people would show up needing those exact things, like needing those exact techniques. um, and then I would say another pivotal point was when COVID hit and we started to come online, right? I was actually quite resistant to coming online because I was very identified with being a hands-on therapist and needing to hold people physically. There's a real profoundness that happens when we're talking about holding parts or seeing parts, and then we're pairing it with the body being held. It's wonderful. So when I came on to was guided to come online, I was resistant because I was like, I'm a hands-on therapist. I'm pretty sure people need this tactile input. And when I got online, I was amazed at what I was able to facilitate and guide people through. And I can actually like bring my hands to people and actually touch their body energetically online and feel their organs and feel their tissues, and people can feel me holding them. And so the next pivotal point was starting to branch out to people who might not have access to a therapist like myself in their area, to now be able to do it online and to see that the things that you're feeling are real and I can feel them too. And so it's another level. Like every little pivotal point was like the next evolution of me expanding and showing up for more people that need it, you know? So that's what comes to me about those pivotal points.
I really, the reason I asked you that question is when we go through trauma, we don't always see those things in the moment, but hindsight's always 2020. And I love to share those things on this podcast because people who do listen to this are going through grief or they feel stuck in grief. And I love to show them that here's somebody who has gone through trauma or gone through grief or loss, and these are moments where things shifted for them. And I always hope that they'll listen to this chapter of the podcast and say, well, I can look for these little moments as I go along my healing journey because they may be signs and awareness for me to shift course. Just like you
Yeah.
said, when you wanted to move, you were going, guide me, tell me where to go. And
I
that
would
you
say that like
oftentimes,
sorry to interrupt because I'm just getting
hey, no,
excited
you're
by
fine.
this
Oh,
because
go.
it's such a great intention to come in with. It's like if you right now, if you set the intention that the universe is speaking to me in some way, and I'm going to keep an eye out for it, you'll receive something. You will. Like, you just will. And I go into depth in this about my book is because when we're in our limited point of view and just in the shit of things, we don't see anything else. We're just seeing what's confirming our feelings and thoughts and beliefs of like how shitty things are, right? But it's when we open up even just a little bit is we're gonna see more, right? And it's actually more realistic to just start with like, well, what if I just opened up just a little bit? What else could I see? And that's how I start to guide people into opening up your lens of awareness and not blasting yourself open, and because then you'll just want to close back up. But it's like, what if today, it's like if anything that you could take away from this podcast today, it's like, what if today, wherever you're at in your journey, if you just intended that, what if the divine is talking to me and there are messages that are available that I might be missing? And what if I intend to pick those up from this moment forward? I'd love to see what happens for you because that was absolutely a critical part of each pivotal moment is being open and willing to see them. And I probably missed a number of them, but it's just when you have this intention, there's more that is coming to you than you realize than when you're in it, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense because, like my own grief journey I went through, I mean, you were right about the blinders, and I always say it's confirmation bias. And I always tell people if you were always looking for shit, you will find shit.
Yep.
I'm just being I'm being blunt about that because that's what happened in my life. When you
Yep.
do open your eyes though and say, I'm just going to look for things, signs to happen. I'm just going to look for them. I'm not going to force it or push or anything like that, but I'm just going to see what comes across my path.
Mhm.
You will be amazed because the divine does answer. And it answers, by the way, in very quiet, very subtle, very like behind the scenes kind of ways. And to your point, when that lady reached out to you when you were in PT school and was able to see you, that's a sign from the divine. God, God, divine, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
put that person right in front of you to say, hey, I see you. I
Yep.
understand you. I've had moments like that on my own journey where I've run into complete strangers outside a grocery store. We just start talking about God or we start talking about the divine, or they start saying things about my life that I've never shared with them before. And I
Mhm.
kind of sit there and go, okay, this is really uncomfortable right now. But then I sit there and go, I'm actually not talking to this person. God's talking through them. And I need
Mm,
to listen to this message right now.
mm,
And like you said, when you can pull those blinders off just a little, not like way out here, but just right here, oh my God, it's just powerful right there. That's the sweet spot to stay in. And
mhm.
that's by the way, living yourself in a little bit of a comfortable zone, but also saying I can go out just a little bit so I can be receptive to those things. And when you do get those messages from the divine, by the way, they're not some big audacious thing that's like, oh, here's the answer, it's right here for you. It's usually this like, hey, just micro shift over here, just a little push over here. And when you listen to that, it's an incredibly big change for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's these little loving nudges that mean the world, but uh, they do appear in such small ways. I want to share this because there's a literalness to the small things, but also the profound things. So my mom, so in my journey, my mom started coming to me in ladybugs. So like the most little thing. And so I would literally have places. There was one time I was in a basement, all windows closed. There's no logical way for a real live living ladybug to be in this basement. And I was journaling one day and in this really deep process, and a freaking live ladybug is on my journal. And I'm like, how? Like I don't understand. And so in my journey, there was all these little pivotal moments where there was many more, but it started with these little things, and like what I would see is like little nods from my mom and like little nods from the divine of like, you're on it, keep going. You're on it, keep going. And so on my book cover, there's little ladybugs. There's little ladybugs throughout. And specifically, I want to share with everybody on this podcast about this is that in my book design, I purposely put this is that so basically during my depression, my mom was always looking down on me.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I love that. So,
Right.
so Devin, I wanted to ask you, what was that process like for you to start writing your book? Because I know I'm in that place of wanting to write one, but I still have a lot of pain going on with that situation. What was
Yeah.
that like to start that process? And when you did end up writing your book, what did that feel like after you wrote it?
Totally. Yeah. Good question. Because for the first probably 10, 12 years, it was like this annoying thing in the back of my consciousness saying, like, you must write it. And I was like, I'm not ready yet. I don't want to. It's too painful. I don't want to put that I don't want to put it out there, right? It was this real vulnerable thing of being like, this is painful enough. I don't want to put it on blast into the world and share my pain. And honestly, my ego is very much like, I'm pretty sure it's only going to bring more pain, right? Like in today's world, so much judgment and so much misunderstanding, blah, blah, blah. So for the longest time, I would like write here and there, like write in my journal when I would have a little inspiration, but basically not be really moving forward with the book in a very like tangible way because I basically didn't want to. And then a few years ago, 2.5-ish years ago, I was guided towards a intuitive writing course, and learned how to
Mm.
actually write my book from my higher self. And so I basically connected to the energy of what the story of the book wanted to share, not what I wanted to share, what I thought needed to be shared, just what my genius, what the divine basically wanted, what needed to be shared for the people reading this book. And so that made it so much easier in the fact of that, like I just basically had to channel and let the words flow through me. But what my guide had told me before I started was like, you're gonna bleed and cry onto these pages. And you need to. It's part of your healing. So I literally wrote this entire book by hand, pen to paper, because I wanted my heart energy to come into the book, like from my heart, out my hands, into the book. And then my tears are in the book. And my like basically it was like the writing of the book was actually like a full circle of part of the healing of like really coming to like, yeah, like I'm really embodying my life purpose and sharing this with the world. So it was a full circle moment, but I was divinely guided toward doing it from an intuitive place. And the story that I ended up writing and the way that the book came forward was way different than if I would have basically written it out of my pain, right? Like if I would have written that book out of my pain down here, it would have been a very different book than what it actually is, and what hope, joy, and true practical application for people who read this book versus just having a book that laments about my pain, you know? So it's been a really interesting journey in writing the book, and it's been even more interesting journey of like having it physically here and like celebrating that and being in the joy of that. It's been really interesting of seeing that because grief actually came up more in like completing the book and having it here in person. So I've been having in the last 2 weeks or so, like just navigating that in my consciousness of leaning into the joy that the book is complete versus like what my ego wants me to pull me into of just being like sad that I ever needed to write the story or sad that this is a thing, right? So it's been a really interesting journey and 100% part of the healing process. Yeah.
I love that you shared that about writing the books. I've met a lot of authors so far on my podcast, and I've always heard there's this very big release that happens for some reason when you write a book. And I'm not there yet because I'm starting my first book this month, writing an anthology, and that's part of what I'm looking for too, is what that experience is going to be like. But I appreciate what you said about writing your own book and writing it by hand too, because I think when we type on the keyboard, I mean, it goes a little faster, but sometimes it doesn't always come out the same way as we're writing as we go along with that.
Yeah, and
Um,
this book in particular, like my guide for the book, it was just so explicit, and it wasn't even from that. It was just like this need to like really share my heart and really like I'm old fashioned in general. I just love analog and pens and papers and buttons. But it was also this like real tactile, visceral thing of moving through that energy versus you can really feel a little separate when you're on a computer and just da 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 da, you know? So it's just speaks to because a lot of part of your healing is like journaling. Like this is why journaling and why like putting pen to paper is such a healing process is because you're actually moving through what's happening inside.
I think journaling is one of the most powerful things we can do in healing because it gives us a place to get all those things out of ourselves exactly the way that needs to be. We're not worried about how it sounds or how eloquent it's going to be. We're not worried about writing a college term paper about our experience. It's just is what it is coming out of here in the way that it's supposed to be. And that really gives us a chance to honor our emotions and honor how we feel,
Yep.
and just embrace where we are in our grief journey because simply put, there is no right or wrong in that situation. It's exactly individual to who you are and where you're at, and that's perfectly where you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
uh, well, Devin, I want to say it's been a real pleasure having you on the podcast. I feel like I need to have you back for a second episode because I can tell there's a lot of depth that we didn't get to today. But
Yeah.
I'd love to invite you back for another episode here in the near future.
Yeah. Love
Um,
it.
do a little deeper dive.
Cool.
As I wrap up the podcast, I wanted to ask, I always ask my guests two questions. If you ran into somebody who's going through grief right now or feels stuck in grief, what is one thing you would leave them with that could help them navigate the journey just a little bit easier?
Mm. One, you're not alone. Even if you're like physically alone, like the divine's still there. There's always an entity that's in service and love, in love and support of you that's always there. That's the number
That's
one thing.
That's beautifully said. I certainly can attest to that on my journey, and I appreciate you sharing that because I think a lot of us forget when we are physically alone that spirit and divine, whatever you want to label it, it is always there. It never leaves you.
Yep.
So that's I appreciate you sharing that.
Hmm.
I also want to ask you if people listen to this podcast and they want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is drdevindegrief.com, and you can find all my goodies there. My book, my podcast, my courses, my coaching, all the goodies.
I love that. Well, for listeners today, I just want to let you guys know Devin's links to her website or socials will all be in the show notes. So if you guys are on YouTube or Podbean, Apple, Spotify, you guys will see them in the show notes. I really want to recommend you guys connect with Devin. She's been one of the most amazing people I've met on my podcast journey. I also want to encourage you guys to go check out her book on Amazon. Is that right?
Yeah,
All right, go check it out on Amazon. I'm actually gonna be buying a copy here soon, so I'm very
awesome.
excited to dive into that. Devin, I just want to say thank you so much for being a guest on today's podcast and sharing your story that you went through. I just want to say I'm very, very sorry that you lost your mom in that tragic circumstance, and I just want to give her a second to honor her life. What was your mom's name, by the way?
Ginger.
Ginger. I just want to honor Ginger's life for a moment. Just want to say thank you for sharing your story and sharing her memory with us today on the podcast.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, for that acknowledgement and also holding the space and being a beacon for this being normalized.
I'm just grateful you and me are out there in the world changing how the world sees grief because there's a lot of people out there that are hurting really bad, and people like us are very much needed to hold space for them and help
Yep.
them navigate their own individual grief journey because we certainly cannot tell you how to do it, but we can walk that path with you and help you find out and discover what your own empowered grief journey is.
Hmm.
So
Cheers to that.
Well, I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Devin and I on today's episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Devin's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Apple and Spotify. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you guys to know you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.